Sometimes life puts us on paths of humiliation to prepare us for a greater destiny. In that airport terminal, I was invisible to everyone except myself. Hello, my dear ones. I'm Margaret Thompson, but everyone calls me Maggie. Today I'm 81 years old with a heart full of stories to tell. Before I begin this story that completely changed my life, I want to ask you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It's such a joy to know that my stories reach so many different places. Today I'm going to tell you how I went from betrayal and abandonment to finding my true strength when everything seemed lost. This story begins on a sunny Saturday in March 2018, when I was 66 years old, standing in Richmond International Airport with my brand new suitcase, wearing my best navy blue outfit, with the pearl necklace my late husband had given me for our 20th anniversary. I had saved every penny from my teacher's pension for 2 years to afford this dream trip to Europe. After 40 years of teaching high school English, dealing with rebellious teenagers and demanding parents, I thought I deserved this adventure. My hair was freshly colored chestnut brown, my reading glasses polished, and my heart was beating with excitement. At 66, I felt like a young woman again, ready to explore castles in Scotland, museums in Paris, and cafes in Rome. My son Bobby, now 41 and a successful bank executive, had helped me plan everything, or so I thought. I arrived at the airport 2 hours early, as always. That's what 40 years of teaching does to you. You're perpetually early and over-prepared. I checked my phone constantly, waiting for Bobby and his wife Patricia to arrive with my grandchildren Emma and Jake. We were supposed to meet at gate B7 at 2 p.m. for our 4 p.m. flight to London. The kids had been so excited about their first trip to Europe, and I was thrilled to be the grandmother who could make their dreams come true. 2:15 p.m. came and went, no sign of them. I called Bobby's phone, straight to voicemail. I tried Patricia's number, the same. My hands started shaking slightly as I dialed Emma's cell phone. Nothing. By 2:30, panic was setting in. Had something happened? An accident? I approached the gate agent, a young woman with kind eyes who reminded me of my former students. "Excuse me, dear. I'm supposed to be traveling with my family, but they haven't arrived yet. Could you check if there's been any delay or if they've checked in?" My voice was steady, but inside I was crumbling. The agent smiled sympathetically and checked her computer. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't see any other passengers under your reservation. Are you sure they have tickets?" That's when my phone buzzed with a text message that would change everything. From Bobby. "Mom, we decided to go without you. Patricia thinks it would be better if you stayed home. We thought the trip might be too much for someone your age. Don't worry about the money. We'll pay you back eventually. Have a good weekend." I read that message 3 times before it sank in. My own son, my own family. They had taken my money, my dream, and left me standing in an airport like a fool. The gate agent saw my face go pale. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need to sit down?" I managed to nod and found a nearby chair. For 40 years, I had taught students that actions have consequences. Today, I was about to become the teacher who proved that lesson in ways my family never expected. The flight to London departed without me. I sat in that uncomfortable airport chair for 2 hours, watching other families board planes together, laughing and excited about their adventures. Adventures I had paid for but wouldn't experience. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had felt since my husband died 21 years ago. But as I sat there, something shifted inside me. The same fire that had gotten me through decades of challenging students, budget cuts, and administrative nonsense began to burn again. I took a taxi home to my small house on Maple Street, the same house where I had raised Bobby after his father passed away. The same house where Patricia came every week with her health smoothies that always made me feel drowsy and confused. The same house where Bobby had insisted on taking over my finances to protect me from online scams. As I unlocked the front door, I realized that for the first time in months, my head felt completely clear. No smoothie that week meant no fog in my brain. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my late husband's desk drawer and pulled out his old leather journal. James had been a meticulous record keeper, and I remembered him always saying, "Maggie, if something seems wrong, start writing it down. Paper doesn't lie, and memory can be our best evidence." I began writing everything I could remember about the past year. Every time Bobby had asked me to sign papers, every smoothie Patricia had brought, every time I had felt confused or sleepy after their visits. By midnight, I had filled 12 pages with details that painted a terrifying picture. My own son and daughter-in-law had been systematically drugging and manipulating me. The trip to Europe wasn't just a betrayal. It was the final step in a plan to isolate me and steal everything I had worked for. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated a woman who had spent 4 decades turning confused teenagers into critical thinkers. Tomorrow, this retired teacher was going back to school. Law school, you might say. The next morning, I called in sick to my volunteer work at the library. The first sick day I had taken in 3 years. Instead, I drove to the Richmond Public Library's main branch and spent 8 hours researching elder abuse, financial fraud, and my legal rights in Virginia. What I discovered made my blood run cold, and my resolve even stronger. Everything Bobby and Patricia had done to me was not just morally wrong, it was criminally wrong. I learned about something called chemical restraint, the practice of using medication to make elderly people more compliant. I read about financial exploitation of seniors and how family members often use their positions of trust to slowly drain their relatives' accounts. Most importantly, I learned that in Virginia, elder abuse is taken very seriously by law enforcement, especially when there's documentation. That afternoon, I did something that surprised even me. I walked into Miller & Associates law firm downtown and asked to speak with someone about elder abuse. The receptionist looked at me skeptically. I'm sure I looked like just another confused old lady. But when Michael Rodriguez, a young attorney, came out to meet me, his face lit up with recognition. "Mrs. Thompson, from Jefferson High School. You were my English teacher senior year." Michael was now 28, a successful lawyer specializing in criminal defense and civil rights. I always said if I ever became a lawyer, I'd help you with anything you needed. "What can I do for you?" When I told him my story, his expression grew serious. "Mrs. Thompson, what you're describing is multiple felonies. We need to act fast, but we need to be smart about it." That meeting changed everything. Michael explained that we needed evidence, real, hard evidence that would hold up in court. We couldn't just rely on my suspicions, no matter how strong they were. He gave me homework, just like I used to give him. I needed to document everything, gather financial records, and most importantly, I needed to protect myself while we built our case. "The first thing we need to do is get you somewhere safe, where you can think clearly," Michael said. "Do you have anywhere you can go where they won't think to look for you?" I thought for a moment, then smiled. "Actually, yes, I think I do." That's when I remembered Dorothy Williams, my neighbor from 3 houses down. Dorothy was 70, a retired nurse whose husband had died 2 years ago. We had been friendly but not close, until now she might be exactly what I needed. I walked home slowly that evening, my mind racing with plans. Bobby's car was in my driveway. He was inside, probably looking for documents to forge or accounts to empty. I took a deep breath, put on my best confused old lady act, and walked through my front door for what I knew would be one of the last times as a victim. "Hi, sweetheart," I called out sweetly. "How was your trip? I got so confused at the airport yesterday. I must have mixed up the dates." Bobby looked relieved that I wasn't angry. "Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry about the confusion. We tried to call you, but you know how cell service can be. Patricia is making you a special smoothie to help you feel better." I smiled and nodded, playing my role perfectly. But inside, I was taking mental notes of everything. The stack of papers on my kitchen table, the way Bobby's eyes shifted when he talked about the confusion, the slightly guilty look on Patricia's face as she handed me that familiar purple smoothie. "Thank you, dear," I said, accepting the drink. "You two are so good to me." I pretended to take a sip, but as Patricia turned away, I poured most of it into the potted plant behind me. Within minutes, I felt that familiar drowsiness creeping in, but it wasn't as strong as usual. I had enough clarity left to sign only one document, a decoy paper Michael had prepared that morning. Everything else I signed with a shaky hand that rendered the signatures legally invalid. After they left, I sat in my living room and cried for the first time since the airport. Not tears of sadness, but tears of rage. How dare they drug me? How dare they steal from me? How dare they treat me like I was already dead? But as I dried my eyes, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Absolutely crystal clear determination. This war was just beginning, and they had no idea who they were fighting. The next morning, I called Dorothy Williams. "Dorothy, this is Maggie Thompson from down the street. I wonder if we could have coffee this morning. I need to talk to someone I can trust." An hour later, we were sitting in her sunny kitchen, and I was telling her everything. Dorothy's face grew grimmer with each detail. "Maggie, the same thing happened to my aunt in Norfolk 5 years ago. Her own daughter was drugging her with sleeping pills crushed up in her food. By the time we figured it out, she had signed away her house, her car, and most of her savings." Dorothy reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "But you know what? We caught them, and my aunt got most of her money back. More importantly, she got her life back. I'll help you any way I can." That afternoon, Dorothy and I drove to a storage unit facility across town. Using cash I had hidden in my bedroom for emergencies, I rented a small unit under Dorothy's name. Then we went shopping for boxes, packing tape, and everything I would need to disappear from my own life for a while. The plan was simple but risky. I would slowly move my most precious belongings out of the house while continuing to play the role of the confused, drugged elderly woman. Over the next 2 weeks, I became an actress worthy of an Academy Award. Every time Bobby and Patricia visited, I played my part perfectly, accepting their smoothies, signing their fake documents with invalid signatures, and acting just confused enough to make them confident in their plan. But every day they weren't there. Dorothy and I worked like a military operation. We photographed every document in my house before I moved it to storage. We copied every bank statement, every insurance policy, every deed and title. Michael had given me a special camera that could document even the tiniest details. Most importantly, we started collecting samples of Patricia's smoothies in small containers that Michael sent to a lab for analysis. The hardest part was maintaining the act when Emma and Jake visited. My grandchildren looked uncomfortable, like they had been told something about me that didn't match what they were seeing. Emma, at 16, kept asking me questions about school, about books I had taught, trying to see if I was really losing my mind. Jake, 14, seemed scared of me, like he thought I might forget who he was at any moment. "Grandma," Emma said one afternoon while her parents were in the kitchen, "are you okay? You seem different lately." I wanted so badly to tell her the truth, to explain that her parents were poisoning me and stealing from me. Instead, I had to smile sadly and say, "I'm just getting older, sweetheart. Sometimes I get confused." The look of pity in her eyes broke my heart, but I knew it was necessary. 3 weeks after the airport incident, the lab results came back. Michael called me with the news I expected but hoped wasn't true. "Mrs. Thompson, Patricia has been giving you a cocktail of prescription sleep medications and mild sedatives. The levels in these smoothie samples would be enough to cause significant cognitive impairment in someone your age. This is attempted chemical restraint, and it's a felony in Virginia. That same day, I made the most difficult decision of my life. I was going to disappear from my own existence and let my family think they had won, while I built the case that would destroy them. Dorothy had found me a small furnished apartment in a senior living community called Sunset Manor, 15 minutes from my house but a world away from my old life. The apartment was available immediately, and the community had excellent security. No one got in without permission from residents. On a Thursday morning in April, while Bobby was at work and Patricia was at the pharmacy, Dorothy and I executed our plan. We moved my most essential belongings to Sunset Manor in 3 trips using Dorothy's SUV. I left behind enough clothes and personal items to make the house look lived in, but everything that mattered to me, my husband's photos, my teaching awards, my mother's jewelry, and my father's books, came with me to my new secret life. I left a note on my kitchen table. Gone to the grocery store and then to visit Mrs. Patterson, my old teaching colleague. Back this evening. Mom. It was the last truthful thing I would leave for my son for a very long time. By evening, I was settled into my new apartment with a new cell phone number, a post office box for mail, and a plan that would take months to complete but would change everything. That night, as I sat in my new living room looking out at a garden I had never seen before, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my husband died. Complete independence. No one knew where I was except Dorothy and Michael. No one could drug me, manipulate me, or steal from me. For the first time in over a year, I was free to think clearly and plan carefully. I opened my husband's journal to a fresh page and wrote, "Day 1 of my new life. Today I disappeared from their world so I could return to my own. Tomorrow the real work would begin." Bobby and Patricia thought they were dealing with a confused old woman who had simply wandered off. They had no idea they were now being hunted by a retired teacher with 40 years of experience catching cheaters, liars, and bullies. The war for my life had officially begun, and I intended to win it decisively. Bobby called my house phone that evening. When I didn't answer, he tried my old cell phone. Nothing. By 9 p.m., he was driving around Richmond looking for me, calling Dorothy, who played innocent perfectly, calling the hospital, even calling the police to report a missing person. The police took a report but weren't concerned. I was a competent adult who had left a note saying where I was going. For the next week, Bobby and Patricia searched for me frantically. They checked with my doctor, my former colleagues, even my old students. No one had seen me. Dorothy told them I had mentioned visiting relatives in North Carolina, which sent them on a wild goose chase for 3 days. Meanwhile, I was 5 miles away, learning to use a smartphone, setting up online banking, and working with Michael to build our legal case. The beauty of hiding in plain sight was that Sunset Manor was exactly the kind of place Bobby would never think to look. In his mind, I was too proud and independent to ever move to a senior community. He was right about the pride part, but wrong about everything else. I had never felt more independent in my life. During my second week in hiding, I did something I had never done before. I learned to drive stick shift. Dorothy's late husband had left behind a 1995 Honda Civic with a manual transmission, and she offered to teach me how to use it. "If you're going to disappear from your old life," she said, "you need to be able to go anywhere without depending on anyone." At 66 years old, I spent afternoons in empty parking lots, stalling the engine and grinding gears until I finally mastered that stubborn clutch. The day I successfully drove from the parking lot to the grocery store and back without stalling once, I felt like I had conquered Mount Everest. That little Honda became my freedom machine. Michael had been busy too. He had quietly contacted an investigator who specialized in financial crimes against the elderly. Detective Sarah Chen from the Richmond Police Department had seen cases like mine before, and she was very interested in what we had discovered. "Mrs. Thompson," she told me during our first meeting, "your son and daughter-in-law have made some classic mistakes. They've left a paper trail that any prosecutor would love to have." The paper trail was damning. Bobby had been transferring money from my accounts to his own in small amounts. Never enough to trigger automatic bank alerts, but steady enough to add up to nearly $30,000 over 8 months. He had also forged my signature on documents that gave him power of attorney over my medical decisions and named him as the sole beneficiary of my life insurance policy. Patricia's crimes were even more serious. The prescription medications she had been using to drug me were controlled substances that she had been diverting from the pharmacy where she worked. Each time she filled a prescription for an elderly patient, she would keep a few pills for herself. She had built up quite a collection of sedatives, sleep aids, and anti-anxiety medications. But the most shocking discovery came when Detective Chen ran background checks on both Bobby and Patricia. My son, the respected bank executive, had been quietly investigated by his employer 6 months earlier for irregularities in some of his client accounts. The investigation had been dropped due to lack of evidence, but it painted a picture of someone who had been stealing from vulnerable people for years. Patricia's record was even worse. She had been reported to the Virginia Board of Pharmacy twice in the past 3 years for suspicious prescription practices. Both complaints had been filed by family members of elderly patients who claimed Patricia had been manipulating their medications. No formal charges had been filed, but the pattern was clear. "Mrs. Thompson," Detective Chen explained, "what your family has done to you appears to be part of a larger pattern of elder abuse. You're not their first victim, and if we don't stop them, you won't be their last." That's when I made the decision that would define the rest of this story. I wasn't just going to save myself. I was going to make sure Bobby and Patricia never had the opportunity to hurt another elderly person again. But first, I needed to let them think they had won completely. 6 weeks after I disappeared, I had Dorothy call Bobby with news about me. She told him that she had received a postcard from me, saying I was staying with distant relatives in Asheville, North Carolina, and that I was confused but safe. She said the relatives had promised to take care of me, and that I probably wouldn't be coming back to Richmond. Bobby's relief was obvious even over the phone. He immediately began making arrangements to clean out my house and put it on the market. He told Dorothy that he was heartbroken, that his mother was too confused to come home, but he was grateful that I was being cared for by family. What he didn't know was that Dorothy was recording every conversation on a device Michael had given her. While Bobby began liquidating my life, I was busy building a new one. I had enrolled in a computer class at the local community college, learned to use social media, something I had always avoided, and even started a small blog about life after retirement. I was becoming the person I had always wanted to be, but never had the courage to become while I was still playing the role of the dutiful mother and grandmother. More importantly, I was building relationships with other residents at Sunset Manor who had stories similar to mine. Margaret Kim, 73, had been financially abused by her nephew. William Harrison, 71, had been emotionally manipulated by his daughter until he had signed over his business to her. Eleanor Santos, 68, had been physically threatened by her son-in-law until she agreed to change her will. We formed an unofficial support group that met every Tuesday evening in the community room. We called ourselves the Second Act Club because all of us were learning to write new chapters of our lives after escaping from abusive family situations. What started as therapy sessions gradually became strategy meetings as we helped each other navigate legal challenges and rebuild our independence. It was William Harrison who suggested that I should consider dating again. "Maggie, you're vibrant, intelligent, and free for the first time in years. Don't waste this opportunity hiding from life." I laughed at first, Who wants to date a 66-year-old woman with a criminal family and a complicated legal situation? But William persisted. I have a friend, Bill Harrison, no relation despite the name, who lost his wife 2 years ago. He's a retired business owner, loves to read, and he's been asking about you since he saw you in the garden last week. I wasn't ready for romance, but I was ready for friendship. Bill Harrison turned out to be a gentle, intelligent man who had built a successful construction company and sold it when his wife became ill. He understood loss, independence, and the challenge of starting over later in life. Our first date was a Tuesday afternoon visit to the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, followed by coffee and conversation that lasted 4 hours. Maggie, he said as we sat in a quiet cafe near the museum, I don't know what brought you to Sunset Manor, and I don't need to know unless you want to tell me. But I can see that you're someone who has survived something difficult, and I respect that strength. For the first time in months, I felt seen and appreciated for who I was, not pitied for what had been done to me. 3 months after my disappearance, Detective Chen called with news that would change everything. Mrs. Thompson, we're ready to make arrests. We have enough evidence to charge both Bobby and Patricia with multiple felonies. But before we do that, I need to ask you something important. Are you prepared for the consequences? Once we arrest them, this becomes public. Your grandchildren will know what their parents did. Your community will know what happened. Are you ready for that? I thought about Emma and Jake, who were probably being told that their grandmother was losing her mind in some facility in North Carolina. I thought about my former colleagues who would learn that the son they had watched me raise with such pride had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I thought about the shame and embarrassment that would come with having the whole world know that my own family had drugged and robbed me. Then I thought about Margaret Kim, William Harrison, Eleanor Santos, and all the other elderly people who were being abused by family members who thought they would never face consequences. I thought about the next victim Bobby and Patricia would target if they weren't stopped. Detective Chen, I said with the same voice I had used to quiet rowdy classrooms for 40 years. I'm ready. Let's end this. The arrests happened on a Tuesday morning in July, exactly 4 months after I had been abandoned at the airport. Bobby was taken into custody at his bank, in front of his colleagues and clients. Patricia was arrested at the pharmacy where she worked, with news cameras capturing her being led away in handcuffs. The charges were extensive: elder abuse, financial exploitation, prescription drug diversion, fraud, and conspiracy. The local news coverage was massive. Retired teacher fights back against family's elder abuse, read the headline in the Richmond Times-Dispatch. My story became a symbol of how elderly people could fight back against those who tried to take advantage of them. The community rallied around me in ways I had never expected. But the most important moment came 3 days after the arrests, when Emma called Dorothy's phone asking to speak with me. "Grandma," she said through tears, "we saw the news. We saw what Mom and Dad did to you. Jake and I want you to know that we never knew. We thought you were sick. We thought you needed help. Can you ever forgive us?" That phone call led to a meeting at a neutral location, a restaurant halfway between Richmond and where Emma and Jake were staying with Patricia's sister. When I saw my grandchildren for the first time in 4 months, they looked older, sadder, but also relieved. The lies they had been told about me were finally exposed. "Grandma," Jake said, "we want to come live with you. We don't want to see Mom and Dad anymore. They lied to us about everything. It broke my heart to see these children caught in the middle of their parents' crimes, but it also gave me hope that something good could come from this nightmare." Over the following weeks, I worked with family court to gain temporary custody of Emma and Jake. Their parents were facing serious prison time, and Patricia's sister couldn't care for 2 teenagers while dealing with her own family crisis. The judge agreed that I was the most stable option for the children, especially since I had just proven my competence by exposing and stopping a complex criminal scheme. Bringing Emma and Jake to live with me at Sunset Manor created some challenges, but the community embraced them immediately. Several residents offered to tutor them, help with homework, and provide the kind of multi-generational support that many modern families lack. Emma started volunteering with our Second Act Club, helping other elderly abuse survivors navigate technology and social media. Jake found purpose in helping residents with yard work and small repairs. The legal proceedings took 8 months to complete. Bobby pleaded guilty to financial exploitation and fraud in exchange for a 5-year prison sentence and restitution of all stolen money plus damages. Patricia fought the charges initially, but when faced with evidence of her prescription drug diversion scheme, she also accepted a plea deal for 4 years in prison and the permanent loss of her pharmacy license. During those 8 months, I experienced a renaissance I had never imagined possible. With the stress of family manipulation gone, my mind felt sharper than it had in years. I started teaching again, not in a school, but offering literacy classes for adults at the community center. I learned to use technology I had always avoided. I traveled to places I had always wanted to see, sometimes with Bill Harrison, sometimes with Dorothy, sometimes alone. Most importantly, I learned to set boundaries. When Bobby wrote to me from prison asking for forgiveness and financial help with his legal fees, I wrote back with a simple message. I forgive you because holding anger hurts me more than it hurts you. But forgiveness doesn't mean I will ever again allow you to take advantage of me. You created these consequences with your choices. The biggest surprise came 11 months after the arrests, when Bill Harrison asked me to marry him. We were sitting in the same cafe where we had talked on our first date, and he said, "Maggie, I know this might seem sudden, but at our age, why wait? You've shown me what courage looks like. I want to spend whatever time I have left learning from you and loving you." I said yes, not because I needed someone to take care of me, but because I wanted to share my new life with someone who appreciated my strength, rather than trying to diminish it. Our wedding was small but perfect, held in the Sunset Manor Gardens with Emma and Jake as our witnesses, Dorothy as my maid of honor, and the entire Second Act Club in attendance. Emma gave a speech at the reception that made everyone cry. My grandmother taught me that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, and it's never too early to recognize your own worth. She saved herself, and in doing so, she saved me and Jake too. We're proud to be Thompsons, because now we know what that name really means. It means you don't give up, even when the people who are supposed to love you let you down. Today, 3 years after that terrible day at the airport, my life looks nothing like I thought it would. I live in a beautiful house with Bill, who turned out to be not just a loving husband, but also a brilliant financial advisor who helped me organize my assets in ways that will benefit Emma and Jake for years to come. Emma is now 19 and in college studying social work, specializing in elder advocacy. Jake is 17 and has been accepted to several universities with full scholarships. Bobby and Patricia were released from prison 6 months ago. They both live in a different state now, working minimum wage jobs and trying to rebuild their lives. They send birthday cards to Emma and Jake, but the children have chosen to have minimal contact with them. Bobby has written to me several times asking if we can start over, but I've learned that some bridges once burned should stay that way. The Second Act Club at Sunset Manor has grown into a regional organization that helps elderly people recognize, report, and escape from abusive situations. We've helped dozens of seniors reclaim their lives and their dignity. Margaret Kim now runs a financial literacy program for seniors. William Harrison started a legal aid clinic. Eleanor Santos created a support network for grandparents raising grandchildren after family crises. As for me, I'm busier and happier than I've ever been. I teach creative writing classes, volunteer with literacy programs, travel with Bill to places I always wanted to see, and spend time with Emma and Jake watching them grow into remarkable young adults. I've learned that retirement doesn't mean the end of your productive life. It can mean the beginning of your most authentic life. The money Bobby and Patricia stole from me was returned with interest, plus additional damages awarded by the court. But the real treasure I gained from this experience wasn't financial. It was the discovery that I am stronger, smarter, and more capable than I had ever imagined. At 66, I learned to drive a stick shift, use social media, live independently, and fight for justice. At 67, I learned to love again and create a blended family. At 68, I learned to help others find their own strength. People often ask me if I regret the way everything happened. They wonder if I wish Bobby and Patricia had just been honest with me from the beginning, if we could have worked things out as a family. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened to you. If they hadn't betrayed me so completely, I might have continued living as half the person I really am. That day at the airport, when I read Bobby's text message, I felt like my life was ending. I had no idea that it was actually just beginning. The woman who got abandoned at Richmond International Airport was a victim. The woman telling you this story today is a survivor, a fighter, and proof that it's never too late to reclaim your power and rewrite your story. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. I hope my story has moved you, and maybe even inspired you. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video. It really helps us reach more people. Every day we bring new exciting stories about life, so feel free to explore and find your favorite. And of course, we want to know your opinion. What did you think of this story? Tell us in the comments. We'll see you tomorrow with another incredible story.